Welcome back to Life with Grief. I'm your host, Tara Accardo. And if you have noticed yourself avoiding decisions, be that big ones, small ones, or even things that used to feel simple or straightforward, number one, I want to say this episode is for you. And number two, that is so valid. That is such a thing when it comes to grief. Decision avoidance, or even if it's not avoidance, it's just difficulty around making decisions is incredibly common. And it often shows up sometimes very quietly without us even realizing it's happening, or sometimes it's very loud and we are just kind of berating ourselves, or there might be some shame around the fact that we cannot make decisions for the life of us, or we're consciously or subconsciously avoiding decisions. And being January, just had a new year, this time of year can just make it feel even heavier sometimes because there's so much pressure around, again, fresh starts, clarity, goals, knowing what comes next. We've had lots of episodes around that lately. Meanwhile, grief doesn't care what month it is, and your nervous system may still be trying to find some solid ground. So, today I want to quickly talk about why decision making can feel so hard as we're grieving, why avoidance actually makes sense, and why it happens, like even neurologically, like what is going on in our brain as that is happening, and how we can gently move toward decision empowerment without forcing ourselves or bypassing where we are right here, right now. Quickly, before we fully dive in, if you are catching this on YouTube, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe, or be sure you're subscribed wherever you enjoy your podcast so you don't miss an episode drop. This also helps me reach even more fellow grievers who need the support and guidance too. So as always, I appreciate you. Welcome to the Life with Grief podcast. I'm your host, grief and soul purpose coach, and fellow griever, Tara Accardo. All right, to kick this off, let's talk about why decision making is so freaking difficult as we're grieving. I think this is especially true in that really acute grief when things are really hitting the fan, when you're in the earlier days. Not that this can't linger, I want to normalize that, but again, I can take myself back to my early days of grief in those first few weeks and months, and frankly, even like year and a half, maybe even longer, because I went through a really horrendous probate process with my parents' estate. And there were definitely certain decisions, even like a year or two out, that I had to make that I didn't want to. It was very difficult for me. So, whatever your circumstances are, I just want to normalize that. But I also want to say grief impacts the brain in very real psychological ways, not just emotional ones, as I think everyone's very quick to typically jump onto. And when we experience loss, especially very profound or, very deep, prolonged loss, our nervous system often shifts into survival mode. And in survival mode, the brain prioritizes safety over long-term planning, right? We're literally, I mean, you might hear people kind of like joke or not so much joke, like minute by minute. That is very real, which means decision making can often become much harder. To get a little sciencey here for a second, the prefrontal cortex, which helps with focus, planning, and evaluating options, doesn't function the same way when we are under chronic stress. This is why even simple decisions, what to wear, what to make for dinner, whether to respond to an email or a message, what the next step in something should be, all of that and more can feel very overwhelming. Grief can also create cognitive overload because so much mental energy is being used to just cope and process and get through today and get used to our life now, our new normal. On top of that, loss often disrupts our sense of identity, right? And many decisions that we would maybe normally make or now have to make are tied to who we were or who we thought we would be or the future that we imagined, or are perhaps tied to somebody that is no longer here. So maybe you would have consulted with them to make a certain decision, right? And now you are like on your own and you're like, I don't know what to do. Who do I, again, consult for this? Like that's very much where I was once upon a time. So if you can empathize with that, please know you are not alone. And when those reference points are gone or shifting, decision making can feel very unanchored and deeply unsettling and perhaps even scary. Like we're going to make the wrong decision, which could lead to avoidance, right? It's like, oh my God, I can't afford to make a bad decision right now, or I can't afford to choose badly, right? So let's talk about that and why we avoid decisions as we're grieving. I think I just touched on a little bit of this, but decision avoidance as we're grieving is not about laziness or procrastination. Well, maybe there's a little bit of procrastination in there, but not in the traditional sense, right? And it is not about a lack of motivation 99.9% of the time. It is often, whether we realize it or not, a form of protection. And avoiding decisions can feel safer than risking making, quote, the wrong choice or, again, a bad choice when everything already feels so fragile. And decisions can make loss feel more real because choosing something new often confirms, right, that like life is different now. And I think for a lot of us, there's this feeling of like, oh my God, if I make this decision or I move forward in this way, then that means I'm moving forward too quickly. I'm moving on, I'm forgetting, right? Like, but that is not the case. That being said, sometimes avoidance shows up because we are exhausted and the thought of holding responsibility for an outcome feels like too much. Or perhaps we did make a decision that resulted in a loss or something bad happening or whatever. So we might feel like petrified and absolutely terrified to make another decision in case it results in more tragedy, more loss, right? So sometimes it is rooted in fear or guilt or even loyalty, kind of on the other end of the spectrum to who or what we've lost. So oftentimes when we are avoiding decisions, it doesn't necessarily mean we're stuck. It means that something inside of us is asking for safety or time or just a little bit of like gentleness and peace for like a second. As always, I have a little bit of a reframe here for you to hopefully take you more from avoidance to empowerment. And I want you to remember the goal in grief, like as we're grieving, is not to force clarity or to rush ourselves into decisions before we're ready. Decision empowerment is more about rebuilding trust with ourselves. It's about learning how to make choices in a way that supports our nervous system, honors our grief and what loss we have been through, and gives us a sense of agency again. So, this is where my little gentle decision path comes in. That is GENTLE. And it is my grief informed little mini framework for moving forward in terms of feeling more comfortable making decisions and going again from avoidance to empowerment. So, to start off with G, ground first. Before making any decision, it's important to check with your body and your nervous system. A dysregulated nervous system cannot typically access clarity, like no matter how hard we try, right? So grounding might look like just taking a few slow breaths, placing, a hand on your body, reminding yourself that you are safe in this moment. And this step isn't just about calming down in the moment, like perfectly in that moment. It's just about creating just enough safety to move forward towards that decision that you might have to make in any particular moment. Next is E, examine the size of the decision. No surprise that grief often magnifies decisions, right? And makes them feel bigger and more permanent than they actually are. So ask yourself whether this is a decision that truly needs to be made right now or if it can wait. Ask yourself whether you are treating this decision like a life altering choice when it might simply be a next step, or it's actually a smaller decision than we're sort of giving it credit for. And we might just be overthinking and just in this state of hypervigilance, right? Not every decision needs urgency, and giving yourself permission to slow down can ease a lot of pressure. So I want to encourage and empower you to do that. Next is N, name what's driving the avoidance. So instead of judging your avoidance, as always, as I encourage you, get curious about it. Ask yourself what emotion or belief might be underneath any hesitation that's coming up. It could be fear, exhaustion, the grief itself, maybe some guilt, a desire to stay connected to the past. Avoidance often carries important information, and listening to it can help you move forward more compassionately and with a little more patience for yourself and the decision at hand. All right, halfway through, we're at T now. Try instead of commit. Grief does not respond well to all or nothing thinking or permanent decisions, as you are probably well aware. So, to the best of your ability, right, depending on what the decision is in front of you, try shifting from like commit to try. Now, if it is not a permanent decision in front of you, again, trust me, I have been there with the varying levels of decisions. Sometimes, if there is a legal decision you have to make or something, right? Or something with a CPA, or I don't know. There's so many things that can come up, right? Especially once we've lost a loved one. So, assuming it is not a major permanent decision like that, shifting from this idea of like, I have to commit to this and like committing to, okay, let me try this, let me just try, can make decisions feel much more accessible and palatable. So ask yourself what a small, low risk kind of experiment might look like. And temporary decisions are great because they help rebuild confidence and remind you that you are allowed to adjust as you go. So, again, forgetting any more bigger, major decisions that actually have to be made within your grief, just try testing this out again with dinner plans or making plans with friends or, like even just those lower stake decisions. That's a great place to kind of test something like this out and see how you feel. All right, moving on to L. Listen to the body, not just the mind. Our body, grief or no grief, often holds wisdom that our mind cannot quite access yet. So it's really important to pay attention to how options feel in your body rather than just how they sound logically, right? So tightness, heaviness, or just total shutdown can be signals to slow down or make a different decision, right? Utilizing our intuition, it is there for a reason. And I want to say, I know how out of touch with our intuition we can feel when loss happens and when we're grieving. This is also a whole part of the process, right? Is bringing ourselves back to our intuition and what feels right and what feels good. So, softening, neutrality, or gentle curiosity can all be signs that something is okay or safe or feels good to explore. All right, last but not least here, E, empower through choice, not outcome. Empowerment as we're grieving comes from making choices, not from guaranteeing outcomes. And I think all of us to some degree know that nothing is guaranteed in life. So can take the pressure off of there a little bit too. You are allowed to make a decision and later change your mind. Most of the time. Again, the caveat for today is depending on what this decision is, but we're talking more of the day-to-day decision stuff. I know there, again, can sometimes be big decisions in front of us within our grief after a loss, but in the appropriate cases, you are allowed to choose differently than your past self would have. Remember that. So each choice you make, even small ones, helps rebuild a sense of agency and trust within yourself. And I promise you, the more you lean into that and the more that you try those things out, like I know this because I've done it, I know from experience, you do start to feel more empowered. You get to know yourself again. That self-trust comes back, that trust with the world and decisions around us that we have to make, like it all slowly but surely starts to fall into place again. So as we start to close out this conversation, if you are standing at the beginning of a new year and feeling a bit stuck or indecisive, or even not in a new year, depending on when you are catching this episode, and maybe it's just a new day that's in front of you, It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you are human with very real world, real life decisions in front of you. You are carrying grief and you don't need to overhaul your life or have everything figured out right here, right now. I know it can feel that way sometimes. And as I've said multiple times today, there could be decisions that are before you or that you have had to make purely out of logistics or because of some circumstances around the type of loss that you have had to endure that you did not feel good about or you didn't feel ready for or whatever. And if that is the case for you, please know I see you. That is so hard. It is not easy. It feels very unfair. It feels like we're just being forced to make a decision before we're ready. And that's a horrible feeling, right? But moving forward, keep everything we talked about today in mind, utilize my gentle decision making framework, and remember that one gentle, supported decision is enough. And we build on that. And we build on that and we build on that because clarity often comes after that movement, after that trust is rebuilt, not before it. And you don't need to see the whole path in front of you, just the next compassionate step that makes the most sense in the moment. And if you are just going with your gut the best you can, you're going with your intuition the best you can, you're taking everything into consideration the best you can in that moment, you can look back and know that you were doing the best you can in that given moment to make that decision in the most aligned way. All right, my friend, that is all I have for you today. So if you enjoyed this episode or you are loving the podcast overall, I would deeply appreciate you sharing it with someone who could use it as well, or leaving a positive rating or review so it helps even more grievers find me. And I'll see you in the next episode.